Have you ever been driving alone on a desolate highway at 2 a.m., surrounded by a fog so thick it feels like the world has ended? Now, imagine seeing a man standing on the shoulder, perfectly still, staring at nothing. You drive for 10 more miles, but there he is again, standing in the exact same spot, in the exact same pose. No other cars passed you. There are no shortcuts. How is he getting ahead of you? And why is he now standing in the middle of the lane, waiting for you to stop? Tonight, we dive into the terrifying reality of the highway phantom. The year was 2022. I was living in Oakland at the time, working a high-pressure job that often required long commutes. That particular weekend, I had driven up to Eureka to visit my parents. If you've never driven Highway 101 along the Northern California coast, you should know it's a place of dualities. During the day, it's one of the most beautiful drives in the world, towering redwoods on one side and the vast, crashing Pacific Ocean on the other. But at night, the beauty curdles into something ominous. It becomes a narrow strip of asphalt winding through ancient, silent forests where cell service dies and the only light comes from your own flickering headlamps. I left my parents' house around 8 p.m. on a Sunday. It was a lapse in judgment. I had an early shift the next morning and convinced myself I could power through the 4-hour drive. The first 2 hours were uneventful, but as I moved south past Trinidad, the atmosphere shifted. A wall of white sea mist rolled off the coast, swallowing the road in seconds. This wasn't just fog, it was a physical weight. Within minutes, my visibility dropped to less than 15 feet. The world beyond my windshield became a swirling white void. I slowed my car to a crawl, maybe 30 miles per hour. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and my eyes were strained, trying to catch the faint yellow lines of the road. That's when I saw the first anomaly. A figure emerged from the haze, standing on the right shoulder. It was a man. He wasn't wearing high-visibility gear, and he didn't have a car nearby. He was just standing there, stiff as a statue, facing the road. He wore a dark, heavy coat that seemed to absorb the light from my LEDs. As I passed him, I waited for him to wave for help or look at me, but he didn't move a muscle. I rationalized it immediately, maybe a local waiting for a ride or a hiker who had lost his way. But deep down, a cold seed of dread was planted in my stomach. 10 miles later, the seed sprouted into full-blown panic. I rounded a sharp, foggy bend and there he was again. The same build. The same dark, heavy coat. The same unnaturally stiff posture. He was standing on the left shoulder this time. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was physically impossible for a human to have overtaken me. I was the only car on this stretch of the 101. There were no side roads, no shortcuts through the dense redwood brush, and certainly no way for someone on foot to beat a vehicle traveling at 30 miles per hour. This time, as my car drifted past, his head snapped toward me. It wasn't a smooth movement, it was a violent, mechanical jerk. I couldn't see his features through the mist, but I felt his gaze, a cold, predatory stare that made the hair on my neck stand up. I didn't slow down. I pressed the accelerator, pushing the car to 45 miles per hour, risking a wipeout just to put distance between us. The fog grew even more suffocating. The trees on either side of the road seemed to lean inward, pressing the mist against my windows. I kept checking my rearview mirror, seeing nothing but the red glow of my own taillights reflecting off the white wall behind me. Then, it happened. The final encounter. Directly in the center of the lane, a figure stood blocking my path. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screaming against the damp asphalt as the car skidded to a halt just feet away from him. He was wearing a hood now, pulled low over his face. He didn't flinch at the screeching tires. He didn't move. He just stood there, bathed in the blinding white light of my high beams. Panic took over. I shifted into reverse, looking to pull a J-turn and head back the way I came. But when I looked at my backup camera, my blood turned to ice. Another figure, identical to the one in front, was creeping out of the fog toward my trunk. I was boxed in.
I hear a sound now, over the hum of my engine. It was a low, vibrating hum, a drone that seemed to be coming from the air itself. The figure in front began to walk toward my hood. He didn't walk like a person, his movements were jagged, as if he were being pulled by invisible wires. In a moment of pure survival instinct, I threw the car back into drive, swerved into the opposite lane, and floored it. As I bypassed the man, a violent, metallic thud rocked the entire frame of my car. It felt like a heavy sledgehammer had been swung into my rear quarter panel. I didn't look back. I drove with my heart in my throat, my eyes locked on the GPS, waiting for the fog to break. Finally, as I hit the interchange near McKinleyville, the mist vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The moon was bright, and the world felt sane again. I pulled into a well-lit gas station, my hands shaking so hard I could barely turn off the ignition. I walked to the back of the car, expecting to see a scratch or a dent from a stray branch. What I saw instead defied logic. My rear bumper was crushed, caved in by a massive, deep impact. But there was no paint transfer from another car. There was no blood or hair from an animal. There were only 4 deep, elongated indentations in the metal, like the grip of a giant, powerful hand. I never drove that stretch of the 101 at night again. Every time the fog rolls in now, even in the city, I look at the side of the road, terrified that I'll see that dark, hooded figure standing there, waiting for me to pass him one last time. Some say the fog on the 101 acts as a bridge between our world and something much older. Whatever hit my car that night wasn't looking for a ride. It was looking for a way in. Stay safe, and never drive into the mist alone. I have run this specific forest trail over 1,000 times. I know every jagged rock, every ancient tree, and every bend in the path. But on one Tuesday evening, the fog transformed my familiar world into an inescapable loop. No matter how fast I sprinted, the forest wouldn't end. And then came the sound, a low, rhythmic drone that didn't sound human, yet it followed my every footstep from the white abyss. When the woods you love turn into a hunting ground, where do you run? This experience took place during my senior year spring break. I grew up in a quiet, almost stagnant suburb where the nights felt heavy with silence. To keep myself productive and clear my mind from the stress of upcoming exams, I had committed to a strict fitness regimen, heavy lifting in the mornings and a focused 3-mile run through the local forest preserve in the late afternoons. On a random Tuesday around 5 p.m., I laced up my shoes and headed out. The sun was still hanging in the sky, but as I approached the trailhead, the atmosphere shifted violently. A wall of fog had descended, not the thin, misty vapor you see on a humid morning, but a thick, oppressive blanket that looked almost artificial. It was as if a white curtain had been pulled across the world. Visibility was cut down to a terrifying 20 feet. However, being young and overconfident, I didn't turn back. I knew this trail like the back of my hand. I entered the tree line. The dense canopy of oaks and pines swallowed what little daylight was left, and the fog filled the gaps between the trunks. I checked my Garmin watch at the 1-mile mark. My pace was steady, and everything seemed normal. But as I hit the 2.5-mile mark, a cold chill that had nothing to do with the weather ran down my spine. At this point, the trail is supposed to veer sharply to the left, climbing a small ridge that leads back to the main road. I kept running, expecting the turn, but it never came. The path just continued straight, deeper into the heart of the marshy woods where no trails are supposed to exist. I checked my watch again, 3.0 miles. The length of the entire loop. Yet, I was still surrounded by a wall of gray mist and skeletal trees. My watch ticked to 3.1, then 3.2. I stopped dead in my tracks, my breath coming in ragged gasps. There are no forks in this path. It is a closed circuit. It was mathematically impossible for me to still be in the woods unless the trail itself had changed. I decided to turn around and sprint back the way I came. That's when the sound began. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't an animal. It was a droning, a low, vibrating hum that sounded like a human trying to mimic the mechanical whine of a distant siren. It had a rhythmic, pulsing quality to it. Asterisk hum. Hum, asterisk. It wasn't coming from the distance. It was coming from directly behind me, hidden in the fog. Panic, raw and cold, took over. I began to sprint faster than I ever had in my life. I was already exhausted from the previous 3 miles, but adrenaline is a powerful fuel. Every time my sneakers hit the dirt, the droning sound pulsed in response. It was pacing me. It wasn't catching up, and it wasn't falling behind, it was simply there, 10 feet away in the white void. I risked a glance over my shoulder, but I saw nothing but the swirling mist. My lungs felt like they were filled with crushed glass. Just as I thought I was going to collapse, the trees suddenly thinned, and I burst through the fog onto the familiar asphalt of my street. I collapsed onto the pavement, gasping for air, the taste of iron in my mouth. I turned back to look at the forest entrance. Standing at the very edge of the tree line was a silhouette. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall, with unnaturally long limbs. It didn't move toward me, it just stood there, swaying slowly from side to side like a pendulum. The droning sound had vanished, replaced by an even more terrifying silence. My family tried to tell me it was just a tall person playing a prank, but I know the truth. No human can move through a dense, foggy forest at a full sprint while making a sound that vibrates in your very bones. Even now, on foggy nights, I stay far away from the tree line.